Welcome, everybody. I have Elle here, who is an executive business coach, licensed massage therapist, family constellations facilitator, and visionary entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the wellness industry. She offers online coaching programs to support holistic practitioners in bringing their business visions to life. She also offers family constellation workshops online and in person to facilitate personal inquiry and to expand our sense of what's possible. Through her work, she aims to connect her clients to greater support, community, and resources. It's her mission to support others in making meaningful contributions by sharing their gifts. And I am so excited to have you on the show. And by the
Thank
way,
you so
Elle
much.
was my massage therapist for a long time, and I miss getting touched by you.
Oh, that means so much. I know. It was really great that those years in Philly when you were doing nutrition and personal training and I was doing massage. Yeah, it was great. It was a
I
great
know,
time of
like
life.
another
Yeah.
lifetime ago.
I know. It feels like forever ago.
I was just sharing with somebody last night that in order for me to activate my parasympathetic nervous system, which is very hard for me because I'm always just on all the time, touch is one of the only things that can do that to me almost instantaneously. And if somebody
Totally.
just touches my hair or they just rub my arm or when I get a massage, granted, it's the right energy because I've also had people touch me where that doesn't happen. But if it's the right person who touches me, I will just literally melt and will not be able to even form a sentence.
I know what you mean. It's the oldest language, right? And it's the first one we know. So, yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
S-
it's pretty
So
primal.
I was so excited to have you on, and I don't think it's an accident. We talked about this, that we scheduled this podcast on a very special day and a day that my life changed many, many years ago. February 7th in 2005, my dad passed away. And we're recording this on February 7th, and we're going to talk about family constellations and generational trauma, and which I am so fascinated by and have been for a long time now. And I want to gain some insights from you and what you've learned being a family constellations therapist and how you work with people. But I was like, should I cancel the pod? And then I thought, no, there's a reason why we scheduled it on this day to talk about this.
I'm so glad that we're having this conversation on a day that's meaningful to you and hopefully taking some of what your experience of the grief over your dad has been and like you, I know through your career have integrated that experience so much and you are such a compassionate person and you have really moved forward into your own future in a way where you're I think like taking some of what your dad has given you and I feel like this podcast is part of that like part of that generosity of taking the life that he's given you and moving forward into the future with it. So that's like actually a family constellation lens, if you will. It's a way of looking at things. So it feels like an auspicious day. And
Yeah, you're making me think about something too. My dad was a musician and a music producer, and he was in the spotlight and he performed. And when you grow up around that, it just becomes a part of your day to day, seeing performance and sharing with an audience. And so from a young age, I always wanted to perform and share with people and did dance and acting classes and then studied theater when I was in college and did lots of community theater. It never went further than community theater. But this podcast, and also when I used to teach a lot of group fitness classes, those are my avenues to almost like share in his legacy of performance and like reaching more people. So I was just thinking about this as I was familiarizing myself with some family constellations before I got on here. I was listening to another podcast and they were sharing a lot about how it lives in our cells, the memories of our ancestors. And then I was thinking, so am I not original? This is something that Mackie knows I think about a lot because I don't think any of us necessarily like, yes, we're unique, but like, how original are we? Because so many of our thoughts, feelings, sensations are actually byproducts of ancestral lineage along with our current circumstances and like the culture that we're in. So then I'm just like, who the fuck are we? Are we even like original beings that have original ideas and thoughts?
The old nature versus nurture debate, right?
A little bit, just because
Yeah.
it's like, how much of me is actually I know there's in more like yogic philosophy, there's the seer, right? There's the observer, there's the part of us that's the real you, the loving awareness aspect of us. But then this personality, egoic aspect of us, like how much is this influenced by our families and the generational lineage? So I'd love to hear more about what even got you into wanting to do the family constellations therapy.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, I actually came into it in 2019, which was about a year after my younger brother, Brendan, died. And I think I've always been a seeker. I've always been interested in personal and spiritual growth and development. And this was sort of a modality that came across my path. For anyone who doesn't know, family constellations is a modality that is both a philosophy and a process that takes a look at intergenerational trauma as well as intergenerational strengths, and is sort of a way of examining how can we not allow past traumas to limit our growth and possibility for the future. So how can we take strength from the past but not continue to recreate trauma that has existed before? So I just came across a couple teachers, and one in particular, her name's Susie Tucker, who I think it was at this point, yeah, 2019, 2020, when everything that I was hearing her teach about the philosophy, I was like, "Oh, this really makes a lot of sense. This is really, like, hitting some bullseye for me around questions that I have around my grief, around personal and professional development." And so I just continued to study it, and the more I studied it, I was like, "Okay, I'm doing this coaching work with clients. I think this would be really helpful to integrate." And so I enrolled in a facilitator. They don't call it a training program because you're never really done. It's like one of those disciplines where you're just always a student, you're always learning more, but it was in the intensive program where you learned how to facilitate. So yeah, I learned that and have been integrating it in my coaching since, and it's been a transformative modality for me, and it's created some really meaningful exchanges with clients too.
Now, have you watched on Netflix the Goop series where they had an episode about family
I
constellations?
haven't, but I need
What?
to. I
So
totally need to. I know
yes,
my
you
colleagues
do.
have been talking about it, and yeah,
That's my
and
only
they're
reference point for
oh,
what this
interesting.
practice is, and I was hoping that you could clarify something around this for me that I saw on the show, which was that it seems a little bit woo-woo, and if you may, and that from what I gathered, there is a group of people that get together that have to be facilitators. They have to be trained in this process. So it's not like they're just random people off the street that get together and do this with one another. But they are taking on the energy of different aspects of your family, but they don't know what role they're playing. They don't know who they're playing, and they're acting out these people, and then it ends up being so spot on where they're like, "You really became my dad. I don't know how you knew those things." Like, it's almost like they're channeling the energy of their family, and they don't know who they're supposed to be or what they're supposed to be, or they might be given something that they're supposed to be doing. Can you clarify a little bit of that for me since you've gone through the trainings?
Absolutely, absolutely, and, within the family constellations field itself, people have different feelings and ideas about how and why this modality works. I think the less we get into the magical thinking aspect of it, the more useful it is to the client. But I'll say from my perspective, part of how it works, and some of it is really beyond, I don't know exactly
I
how
think a
this
lot of
works,
things are
but
beyond our comprehension, and that's becoming more understood now, and people are accepting that because listen, you sitting here with me right now is beyond our comprehension. If you were to show an iPhone to somebody in the Middle Ages, they would think that you were some alien being. That would be beyond comprehension. So I think we need to just understand that a lot of things are we're not meant to understand and they're the invisible. It doesn't mean that they can't be so useful.
And I think that's spot on because I think some of the family constellations process, we don't 100% know how it works, but we do know that it has creates meaningful experiences for people. And from my perspective, here's how it works. You have a workshop, you have a client come in with a question that they're asking. It's usually something in their life that they are finding challenging and would like to take a look at. They would like to understand better. And the facilitator will then ask some follow up questions to the client to get some clarity. And the client will then pick representatives from the workshop to represent different family members. So the facilitator decides which people we're going to bring into the center of this circle to represent. It's essentially an embodied approach to taking a look at intergenerational trauma and dynamics. So we have physical bodies representing relationships between people. And it is this phenomenon that happens where when people are chosen to represent, say, your mother or your father, when they stand in that space and you ask them how they feel, they can report back on what they're feeling. People often tend to note that these are accurate. My personal sense, there's two pieces to it. One, really the client is just taking what makes sense to them. So it's just what they already know. It's like a confirmation of what they already know. And if it doesn't resonate with them, if it doesn't make sense, they won't get they won't get anything from that particular representation, and that's okay. So ultimately, like, the power is with the client in
Mhm.
terms of what they are taking from the experience, what makes sense to them. And so I think that it's really hard to explain, but I think that takes some of this unknown element out of it. It really is about the client's experience and what they are seeing represented in front of them that resonates with them as being true. Um, I think there is another piece to it, which is that human beings, we communicate nonverbally in all kinds of ways. I think we're connected, to your point, in ways that we don't even know. And when we step into this experience of representing someone else's family member, we may know nothing else about them, but we can pick up on certain dynamics or certain feelings within this system in this experience of a workshop. And yeah, some of it can sound pretty woo, but I think the thing that we lean on as facilitators is more so looking at the dynamics between people and what's making sense to the client. So we always trust the client in terms of, does this make sense to you? What are you seeing? What are you noticing that checks out for you versus believing a representative in a constellation who may be saying something that like isn't factually true or that they don't know about. Don't know if this is making
Yeah,
sense.
I so the representatives that are being picked to play the different roles, do they know that, okay, you're gonna be dad, you're gonna be aunt, you're gonna be mom? Do they know who they're playing?
Sometimes they do, and it depends on how the facilitator likes to work. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Most
Okay,
often, they do.
okay.
Most often, they do.
I could see where this could go awry if you this is why you can't have an untrained person just stepping into the role of somebody's family member, because I could see that. How does somebody not just start role playing and project their own stuff into the
Oh,
role?
no. Let me
Okay,
clarify.
okay,
So
yeah,
so for
clarify that.
people in a workshop, you
Okay.
don't have to be trained at all to represent. The
Oh, interesting.
only thing is but facilitators definitely need
Okay.
to have some studies and some training so that if someone is coming in and projecting, it doesn't get blown out of proportion. Like, the facilitator kind of holds the space for, with the client in terms of what we are determining as useful
Mhm.
information. But if representatives come in, so other participants in the workshop who are chosen to represent these different family members, if they come in and represent, so long as they're just reporting what I am feeling in this moment and they're
Mhm.
not interpreting it or adding a lot to it, if they
Mhm.
just simply report, this is what I'm feeling in this moment, it often tends to be relevant and accurate
Got it. They're not
or
doing a
useful information.
Shakespearean play all
Correct.
of a
This is
sudden that
not
they're
it's not a role people are playing, it is a space people are stepping into and just reporting back what they're feeling. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling really angry right now.
Mm.
When the representative for dad comes in, I notice I start feeling like really sad and I want to cry,
See, that's
things like
so
that.
that's where the channeling is coming into play here, where I'm thinking you're saying that they're representing some sort of energy that your family member may have been carrying, and you're just saying, "Okay, we're holding this space, we're giving permission for this energy to come through. We don't even know what it's gonna be." And even if it's exact or not, it's triggering the client in some way to have a catharsis and work through what needs to be worked through with these family members, whereas it's hard to do the work with people because the work has to be done on your own. Like, you can't often have completion with family members because they're never gonna necessarily give you what you need, right? You can't force somebody to be who you want them to be, whether it's your mom or your dad or your sibling. So you have all of this trauma going on inside of you, and you want completion in some way with these patterns, right? So is this sort of this physical representation of, like, energy coming into physical form that then they can have a completion of some sort of trauma patterns?
I think that can be a piece of it sometimes. I think it's certainly a way of gaining a deeper understanding of dynamics that have existed. Sometimes it's about showing patterns that have existed in the past that have flown under the radar, that people haven't been aware of. And because it's such a visual embodied representation of it, it's easier to understand when you're literally seeing it in front of your eyes. And for
Mhm.
example, if someone has unresolved something around their mom, when we put a representative in for mom and start to examine what her life experience is and what her relationship was with her mother and her mother's relationship was with her mother, sometimes the client can get a different perspective, a deeper perspective maybe on what's actually going on beyond like the dyad of just me and mom.
Yeah, and I could see how that could provide some sort of empathy for yourself and for everyone in your
Yeah.
family, understanding that this is much bigger than just even what you experienced with mom. You're looking at, "Well, my mom experienced this," and I think about that with my mom. My mom had complex post-traumatic stress disorder and addiction, and I think about her mom who was an alcoholic and could not care for her, and she had abuse from her dad, like physical abuse when she was young. So that she was a product of all of that really intense trauma when she was little. And then I thought back to, okay, so I know that it's from her, not from her mom, but this is like a lineage that she comes from, and I don't know anything about my great-grandma. So I'm like, there has to be something there. If my grandma was an alcoholic and had all of these problems, I'm sure that her mother and father, something was going on there, and I don't even know how far it goes back. And then we can also talk about just even there's epigenetics with certain groups, right? I'm an Eastern European Jewish person. There's been a lot of research done on our lineage and how we've been affected by the Holocaust and fears and anxieties that we carry that maybe other people don't have those same kinds of fears. So I think about that in a way. It's a great insight to understanding like why you might be feeling the way you're feeling. It's not just your circumstance currently.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a facilitator, part of what we look at when clients are bringing challenges, questions, things they want to look at, things they're struggling with, we're looking and asking questions about what in that person's life or their parents' life, grandparents' life, what was the traumatic event that came in and changed the way the family related to themselves, to each other, and to the rest of the world forever. So these are things like war, famine, genocide, all of the things, right? And that provides a way of understanding why the family responds in certain ways. So, for example, alcoholism, right? Substance abuse, depression, anxiety. These are not, when we look at it through a lens that allows us to see the origins, it's no longer just about the difficulty of the response to the trauma. We can actually understand how it makes sense, how it's a completely logical response to life events that happened 2, 3, 4 generations ago. And what tends to happen is we continue to live in our present lives as though the same original trauma, the war, the famine, the genocide, are still happening.
Mm.
So the way the family parents raise children to survive, and they pass on some of these sort of survival mechanisms that over generations can stop being useful, and they can actually continue to create problems after the trauma has passed. So part of what constellations does, I think, is provides a way of looking at what were the conditions under which these behaviors, these ways of relating to the world developed, and how can we take from the past what gives us strength while letting go of the things that hinder our ability to more move forward into the future with greater ease and greater freedom.
Yeah. So how do you once you identify where some of these patterns might be coming from that at one point, like you said, could have been really useful in a survival time. You may have needed to put on your bootstraps and really just do what you needed to do to survive in those moments. But now we have so many more creature comforts, and that you're not in that famine, you're not in that state any longer. However, your nervous system is responding as if you are. So how do we begin to once we recognize and understand it, which I think is a really useful to know, okay, it's not my fault. I think that's a really powerful understanding for people to have. Like we tend to carry a lot of shame and blame when we are acting in ways that we're not proud of, or we're using substances or relationships or whatever it may be, and we feel stuck in these negative patterns, right? So it's not your fault. This has been carried on, and this is the byproduct of a lot of different lineage that you're a part of. Once you understand that, where do you go from there in order to like, it's one thing to be able to say, "Okay, I'm just gonna let it go," but how do you really have the letting go?
Well, I think it's a lifelong process, probably, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think, yeah. And I think there are so many layers to how we became the people that we are. So, one, I think we're never completely done, but I do think that the experience of looking and having the privilege of being able to look where maybe the people who came before us had to work so hard to survive they couldn't look. So I think looking and acknowledging what has happened and the way the family has coped and the behaviors and ways of relating that they have cultivated as part of this survival language, I think looking and acknowledging that is part. I think that's the very first step to creating any kind of shift or change. One of the things that I think is helpful and can be helpful about family constellations workshops is they are it can be done one-on-one, and they are often done in groups. And so there is a piece of it that is like having all of this witnessed. Like you are doing this in front of other people who are holding that space as well. And you're then getting to see other people work through their stuff. And we realize that, oh, it's not just my family, it's everyone. And there's all these interconnected themes.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know who said this, but I know there is some definition of trauma that's about it's not about necessarily an actual event, it's whether or not we experienced the event alone and unable to talk about it with other people. And that trauma
Mm.
happens when we're not accompanied or when everyone is so in survival around us that we cannot process. We can't have anyone say, whatever you're feeling is okay. I'm strong enough to hold it. Go ahead and rage or cry or do whatever. It's when we don't have that accompaniment. And so I think part of what's interesting about so many therapeutic modalities and also about family constellations is that there's a quality of witnessing and allowing the feeling of these primary emotions to be processed and to see that it didn't kill anybody, including me.
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
I survived this. And then
Yeah.
to begin to explore, well, if I don't have to keep repeating the same behaviors and responses to survive, maybe I have some other options available to me. Maybe,
Wonder that.
right? So, for example, like addiction in constellation philosophy is looked at as a resource. It's what helps people survive to some degree. And obviously, it is not a healthy resource. And it also, in many cases, can actually be quite dangerous and lead to death. But
Sure.
in some context, it is actually trying our best to cope and stay here. Oh,
Understand that because you can have addictions that aren't detrimental. I have an exercise addiction that I'm, very open about. Like I would say I've worked on it a lot throughout the years, but that and I feel like I guess I don't wanna say I am an addict because I would say that I more identify as this being a part of what I used in the past a lot. I now have a much healthier relationship to exercise and that I can take days off and I can go on vacation and those that wasn't part of my reality for a long time because I used that as a coping mechanism to feel normal. And whatever chemicals were being released during exercise really made me feel okay. And whereas I would feel a little bit of low level depression without having that dopamine and serotonin boost that I was getting on a daily basis. And that was a way that I was getting my needs met. And I didn't realize this for a long time. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm changing my state. Whether somebody does it through numbing themselves with alcohol or they do it. Sometimes people do substances to feel something even because they can't feel, and then when they do a substance, they feel something, and they feel even if it's not good or whatever, it's emotion, it's something. Because as human beings, we just wanna feel, and we wanna feel alive, and we wanna feel connected in some way. So, I am with you on that. I completely agree with that philosophy around addiction.
totally. And this isn't my original thought. This is my teacher's, but one way of looking at addiction is that it kind of takes our world and makes it smaller. It makes everything that feels really uncontrollable, we kind of hone in on this thing, this habitual behavior, whatever, this thing that we can lean on, but it makes our world smaller because we're trying to like everything that feels bigger than that feels inaccessible. It feels like it's too much. And so part of with family constellations, what we're looking at is like, okay, how can we identify other resources that exist so that it's not even necessarily saying give up addiction right now, but it's saying how can we start to bring in these other resources and identify them? Things
Mhm.
like making art, making music, spending time with friends, connecting with ancestors who wish us well. There's this long list of inner and outer resources that we could lean on so that maybe over time we don't have to lean on the addiction as much. And I don't
Mhm.
know, my hunch with you, you talked about you used to need your exercise to be a certain way and need this dopamine hit, and something has shifted where it is not you don't have those exact same needs to rely on the exercise addiction resource in a way. My
Yeah.
hunch is that you have other resources, like other things perhaps that you have cultivated or that you've identified that you lean on so
Yeah,
that, you know yeah,
I'm more resourced for sure, and I think this is huge. I'm thinking about just anyone listening to this. Are you resourced? This is not necessarily again, the blame and the shame we carry with stuff like this and just feeling, "Oh, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I carry these problems with me, and I don't know how to fix them. I just constantly in my habitual patterns that even though I know they might not be the best for me, but I don't really know any other way, and willpower is that's not the tool. We need to be resourced, and like you're sharing, we need to start to think about what are our needs that aren't being met. My first foray into that was when I was dealing with binge eating when I was in my early 20s, and I was completely helpless and feeling like I had no control, no willpower around food being everything that I thought about all the time. When I would get home, I couldn't stop eating. And what I realized through therapy was that was my way of resourcing myself and giving myself something that I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the understanding of the hole that I was trying to fill. And it was a hole that could never be filled. Throughout receiving counseling around that, one of the biggest things that I realized that took a lot of shame off of me was that it wasn't my fault, that this was my coping mechanism. Similar to exercise, they were all connected. Over exercising, the food, it was one big cluster of things that was going on, right? And that was the side effect of the trauma and that I had experienced and the needs that weren't being met. It was liberating for me to realize that nothing was wrong with me. I just didn't understand how to take care of myself, and that's when I started to think about What is it that I actually need that I'm missing? And at the time, I was very lonely. So that was a big part of it is I think that we silo ourselves a lot when we're feeling intense emotions. Many of us retreat and we feel really alone and we're ashamed to share what's going on because we feel like something's wrong with us. Whereas I needed community and I needed to resource myself. So lots of therapists. That's when I went to yoga for the first time, and I was in the yoga studio. I went every day, 7 days a week for a year, and it was a healing experience for me because I was held in this community where yoga is so non-judgmental, and really the philosophy of it is about just being with yourself, with where you are, and trying to have compassion for yourself and others, and it's not about how you look or how high you can get your leg above your head. So I felt like for the first time I was in a community where there was no judgment and there was a lot of space and connection to just discover myself. And then through lots of reading and more understanding my psyche and what had happened to me, that allowed me to begin to heal. And you mentioned having witnesses. That aspect is very interesting to me. And you said that when we have trauma, oftentimes trauma is it's not what happened to you. Trauma is the byproduct of what kinda gets stuck after what happened to you. I could go ride my bike right now and fall off my bike and then process that and be like, "Oh, man, like, there was some ice on the road and you fell, and you can cry, you banged your knee, it's okay." And I can understand that's not necessarily gonna happen again, and I can get back on my bike tomorrow. But if you fall and you don't have the ability to parent yourself in that moment, or if you're little and you don't have the parent there to be like, it's totally fine. We all fall off our bike. I love you. You're safe. The bike's not going to hurt you. Tomorrow we're going to get back on there. We're going to get on another ride. That doesn't become a trauma. So it's
Exactly.
very, very
Yeah,
interesting to me that it's like when you have witness and you're in this council circle, if you may, of people, that there's a lot of healing that can happen in that when you have other people holding that and giving you space to
absolutely.
feel. That's really amazing.
And some of it I agree, and some of it's also really at the heart, it's about connecting to the people and resources who the people who are resources who came before us. When any of us comes to a family constellations workshop or to this work, some of this strength that we are connecting to is not just the other people in the room. It really is about looking in our own ancestry and in our own lineage and not just identifying the traumas, but also identifying the strengths and taking a look and seeing who was adept at riding a bike, who existed before that person fell off the bike and it became such a traumatic event, right? Like looking for all these different people who can bring us strength, and they can be aspects of certain people. So, for example, we might have conflicted relationships with a parent or both parents or step parents, but the idea that life found a way to come through to us and that we are still alive to be here asking questions is in and of itself a gift. And so ultimately that's a lot of what the family constellations philosophy and process is about, is saying thank you for my life. I receive it from all of the ancestors. We wouldn't have it unless it came from not only our parents but grandparents, great grandparents, how many generations before. And from that stance, we can actually take from them strength and move forward into the future in ways that outpicture the past instead of recreating it.
That's beautifully said. Yeah. I definitely think about that with my parents being passed, that they're the reason I'm here, even though it was a very complicated relationship that I had with both of them. I'm grateful that I get to experience this precious, amazing life. For all of the sorrow and grief that we experience throughout our life, that is also a normal experience too. It's part of being human. We're not unscathed as a human being in this life. All of us are going to go through some hard times. And I try to look at that through the lens of then we should really be feeling that when the sweetness is there, that it is precious and it is such a gift, and we need to hold it tight in the moments that we can and really be with it and be present with it, which I think can be quite a challenge for myself even included. Like, this is a practice that I have. This is not like a daily thing. Trust me, I'm annoyed still all the time and, on autopilot all the time. And then I'm like, "Oh yeah, like I get to live today. It's pretty amazing. This is pretty cool." Like, I don't, we could always complain. I think it would be such a challenge for me if I didn't complain in a day, but I do, right? I complain all the time.
You're allowed, we're allowed.
It's tough.
We're totally allowed.
It's hard. The
Yeah.
wiring for us is very as human beings, we're wired to be a little bit negative and complainy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're all on the lookout for the bear in the woods or whatever the thing is.
I
Yeah,
know. I know.
abs
I appreciate that lens of looking at it no matter how wild your lineage was in terms of things that happened. You are here. You are standing here to also create new pathways and heal that generational trauma, which is huge. I'm curious for you, it seems like this is pretty new in the last, I don't know. For me, I've only been really stepping into this like spiritual world in this sense for 4 years now. But it seems like people are very into, I recognize my patterns of my family, and I am the first person that can heal this generational trauma. I'm curious, like, why do you think that is? Is it just because of our comfy, cushy world we live in? We're not surviving as much? Or is it more than that? Mhm.
I think it depends, right? I think we may get to a place where we have the freedom and the ability to take a look at the trauma when we have enough distance from it. And there we have multiple traumas throughout generations and throughout one life. So for example, the death of each of your parents, your dad when you were really young and your mom more recently. These could be different traumas. Being Jewish, everything that comes with that, right? How many generations back, right? Looking at different traumas. So I think there are multiple layers, but I think to be able to take a look at what we can, I guess to answer your question, I wonder if globally that's true. I think to your point, you're right. Maybe in the United States, for some of us who are a certain degree removed from certain original traumas, maybe we are more equipped and better able to take a look at it because we have the gift of the distance from it,
And
um,
privilege, like you're
and
sharing. I
privilege.
think that's such a good point because here I am in my own myopic kind of perspective of, but that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. There's a whole world out there, and there are so many experiences happening that are not the experience that you and I are having." And if you think about that, you're like, "That's right. This is just my perspective that's happening and that I'm seeing this in my world that a lot of people are have the privilege and the space to heal some of that trauma." But a lot of people don't get that in this lifetime.
And I think part of it too, to your point, uh, I think it's related to your point that with technology being what it is, I do think that for a lot of us with internet access and smartphones and all this, we are able to access more information and connect with others more easily. And so I imagine that plays some role in it as well.
Yeah.
But I know, for example, immigration can sometimes be a trauma. So when we're looking at in the United States, it is often maybe the great grandparent generation that came over and from whatever country they came from. And often they were fleeing something going on in the original place. So the great grandchildren are often far removed enough from it that they can look.
Mhm.
Their survival is not so threatened on the immediate that they can take a look.
Yeah, and I think it just keeps, like, reminding me to have compassion on a lot of levels for where people are because it's the byproduct of what they experienced, and their lens of the world is a very different lens than what maybe you experience. Your mom's lens or your grandmom's lens or the great grandma, it's all very different.
So, part of what I've learned through my study of family constellations is this idea that every family is like a little mini cult.
Mm,
And we get raised in this certain way where we get these blueprints downloaded from
yeah.
even like when we're pre-verbal. And there's just this way of relating to each other and to the world that just seems like that's the way the world is. But it's largely some of it is a survival language that we don't know otherwise until we get old enough and grown enough and resourced enough that we can go out into the rest of the world and be like, oh, I thought everyone's family was afraid of snakes. Turns out it's just mine or
Yeah.
everyone in my neighborhood or whatever. Like, I thought that was a thing. Turns out it's not. Turns out there's so much more out there than what I was raised to believe is possible. There are all these different ways of responding. And part of what I love that I have been taught is that family constellations isn't necessarily a healing modality. It's not necessarily therapeutic. Excuse
Mhm.
me, it's not necessarily therapy, though it can be therapeutic. Healing can be a byproduct, but that ideally, it's this idea that what happens through this process of looking and understanding and acknowledging what has happened, we are then able to look towards the future with perhaps greater possibilities where we can see that there is more freedom available to us, where we can be more creative with the choices that we make. And that from that place, maybe healing happens, but that ultimately, perhaps the goal of family constellations is simply to show us that there are more choices out there than we thought were possible, that the world doesn't have to fit into this very prescribed, narrow view of as we were taught that this is how things are, but that there's a lot more possibility out there. There's all kinds of ways to live when you're not so afraid.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. I I definitely realized how fearful I have been since I can remember, right? And where does that come from? Just thinking
And
that's
you're Jewish.
we could say part
I
of
mean,
it, right? That
that
could be that's a
yeah,
big part
could
of
be
it.
part of it.
So it's just all my different family having these anxieties and fears and control, and it's normalized to be neurotic in a sense and to be hyper vigilant and to think that bad things can happen if you don't stay focused all the time. And you think about some of that language or some of that energy, it's really limiting and keeps you quite small and in this box. And
Absolutely.
what I'm trying to break free from is that, and every ounce says, "Don't do that, it's so scary." And then there's this other part of me that has to face the fear and go through with it. And so this is a very like, micro example of something that's really a big deal for me. So we're gonna be taking a vacation soon. We're gonna be going to Costa Rica. Yes, I cannot wait. And I have a goal to zip line, and this is something that I you couldn't have paid me to do something like that before, 'cause
You are
I
so
my
brave. I still
mind
don't think I
in
could.
my mind, I'm gonna be the one where the cord snaps and I fall to my death, like, just me. Even if 30 people go by and they're, "Woo!" and they're having a great time, my survival brain goes on full force alert of, "You're gonna be the like, your life's over today." And but then I'm trying to visualize myself just letting go, screaming, free, like, just having the experience that I've seen other people have that seems so awesome. And maybe it's not awesome. Maybe I'll go do it and I'll be like, "All right, never again." But that is just an example of how I'm really trying to break free from this box that I've always kept myself in of, "This is who you are, this is how you are, or this is what you do. You're a fearful person, you don't take risks, you don't do stuff like that." So, that's just an example that I'm trying to
I
work
think it's
through.
I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome, and you're no stranger to doing things that are scary. I mean, you have had your own businesses. You are doing a podcast right now, like, being a woman and having a voice, I think
Sure.
takes a lot of courage. You've had this move that you did a few years ago. I think you have developed quite a track record of showing yourself that you can do things that are
Scary.
scary and
Yeah.
challenging.
None of those things that you mentioned, though, directly correlate to death. So, for me, most of my fears around that, never putting myself in a situation where I could potentially be put in danger and
I,
Hi.
like, I totally relate, I totally relate,
And I
and
think
I know
this
I don't have to go that far too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Like, you don't
yeah.
have to go to the ancestors, we can go to, like, my dad died when I was 16,
Yep,
like, of a heart attack, like, just here one day, gone later that same day. Same with
yep,
my brother, like, just heart disease, just boom, didn't see it coming, and then, of course, there's this fear of death, like, that it's so logical in a way, and then at the
yeah,
same time, something constellations has helped me with is to I think some of my anxiety around death is a way of remembering them.
mm,
It's kind of like a way of saying, "I'm not gonna forget. I'm not gonna forget about them, and I'm not gonna let their lives be in vain," and all this, and I think looking at it in a way of, "Oh, there's, like, other ways of honoring them too, and there's other ways of remembering," which, of course, is so much of this is embodied,
yeah,
right? Like, these fears, and it's to your point about epigenetics, that for good reason, it's to help us survive,
mhm,
but part of a place that I don't wanna say I've come to because I feel like it's a continuous process, but knowing that honoring my brother, and this was a constellations thing, and my dad, the best way to do that is by living my life more fully.
mm.
That is actually, like, the celebrating life piece. I don't know if I'm ready to zip line yet. I don't know if I'm quite that brave. I give you major props.
I mean, here I am saying this and declaring this to all the listeners and you, and watch me when we go there, like, freak out and be paralyzed with fear, and it is what it is. I'm ready to face whatever that may be because we don't have full control over how our body reacts sometimes in these scenarios. I have had the freeze moment when I've done scary stuff like different hikes and heights and things that I've totally frozen where my legs were just shaking, and it's that is debilitating fear. That's not just, "I'm a little bit afraid." That's like you're debilitated in that moment. We'll see what happens, but it is a goal of mine because I feel like it would be a really cool representation of how far I've come, in facing those things, and I know that you're not fully living if you're always thinking about dying, and that's something that I'm really present to.
Preach. Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
do I wanna get to the actual who I don't even know when the actual end of my life is. We sometimes say that, like, we have this fantasy that we're all gonna be, like, old, laying in a bed, and that we are gonna be totally present to knowing, "Oh, and I'm about to close my eyes and go away now. Goodbye, everybody." Like, none of us actually know if that's going to be how we leave this world, but if every day I spend obsessing and thinking about death and, like, how I'm gonna go and what happens after, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier, there are these questions that we just cannot get answered as human beings. We're not meant to know the answer to them. We're meant to just experience and live fully living. What does that look like? And for me, fully living would be not living with fears all the time. Yes, we can't get rid of them completely, but whatever the fears are that are like really making you not present.
Absolutely. Like, I know for myself, so if we were in a family constellations workshop and I were to pick a representative for, say, my dad who passed away when I was 16, and a representative for myself and a representative for the future, say, like, good things in the future.
Mhm.
And there's this embodied way of looking at it where if we are, say, in a circle in the middle of the room, one direction is the future and one direction is the past. So my anxiety and my fear would look like me maybe standing in the middle, but looking towards the past, towards my dad.
Mm.
So every time I'm afraid of dying, every time I have this anxiety, I am not actually looking in the direction of the future. And so this is one of those ways that, like, when we set stuff up in a constellation, you get this visual image of what can often largely be like an internal process that can be really helpful. And so, anyway, I just wanted to share that.
No, I think
But I
that's
hear
really
you. I feel you.
cool. And I do think these visual representations, going back to the whole philosophy of this, is really powerful because not until something is really shown and looked at can you fully process it. You have to have a level of awareness and cognition around what it is that you're feeling and what it is that's holding you back. And we don't really ever get the chance to do that. We just often are just succumb with emotion or, again, trying to resource ourselves with things that might not actually be giving us what we need all the time. So I think this is such a incredible tool that people can use, and I know there are many tools. This is just one of many therapeutic modalities that people could try, and I think, like, when you discovered this, you said that you it just felt like it just connected with you. You felt that feeling of, "This is I get this. This
Yeah,
makes
so much of
sense
the
to me."
philosophy, I was, like, learning more about the philosophy and reading some of the books and studying with teachers. I would hear certain pieces and go, "Oh my god. I've been, like, struggling with this question, but that makes so much sense." Like, when I look at it from that perspective, that makes a lot of sense, that's really empowering, and it helps me live my life more fully.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that would be anyone else's experience, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but that's been mine, it's been helpful.
My goal is
I
just to
think
expose people to this stuff on the podcast and have different people come on and share, and I say this all the time, but there's no truth. Truth is a completely subjective experience. So what feels true for you, Elle, I might be like, "That just doesn't feel true for me in that modality," versus something that feels very true for me, and I hope to have an episode on this soon, is internal family systems. Also, what you're sharing,
yes,
that I think they're very similar, they're connected, they're different ways of working with parts of ourself and trauma, but that when I read about internal family systems and started watching videos and reading books, I was like, every fiber of my being was like, "Yes, this is an understanding. This is an in for you to understand all the different parts that kinda talk to me on a regular basis and who they are, what they
absolutely.
are." Yeah.
Absolutely. And really, in family constellations, when we're setting up representatives for different family members or different ancestors, they're actually, it's pieces of them that are pieces of us.
Mhm.
It's kind of all like this internal family system. There's definitely some connections there. And I'm so glad that that speaks to you and that you have this sense of like resonance. I think that is so key and so important when we are looking for support, whether it's therapeutic support, creative support, anything that helps us live our lives better, because having that degree of choice and of being able to choose what really speaks to you as opposed is so healthy, as opposed to, I think, perhaps other resources where you have to believe one thing. Everyone has to believe the exact same thing. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. And if you don't do what we say, you're screwed. Those, I think, tend to be less helpful. And so
You
I'm a
mean those are
huge
cults?
advocate. I think they're, well,
Some of
literal
them?
cults, literal cults, but I think that way of thinking can be present in so many different, like,
Oh, the dogma.
organizations, groups of
Yeah.
people. Yeah, either you're with us or you're
Also just
against
the way
us.
that people make money, like, the dogmatic approach
Yes.
is makes money in every industry, right? Like, "I know this is the way, and if you give me $1,000 today, I will make all of your problems go away, or I'll make you money, or you'll have a healing," or whatever it may be, and the the reality, my truth, at least with that, is that's not true. Like,
It's not true. I think it recreates the parent-child dynamic,
yeah, you're
which
looking
you
for
can never
authority.
do. Yeah, you can never be someone's mom that didn't mother them enough or father that
Yeah,
didn't father them enough, and it inevitably, I see this a lot in our industry, in the coaching industry,
yeah.
and it inevitably just creates disgruntled clients, unhappy clients, and this sort of guru mentality
No
of, "I can
experience
save everybody."
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you experienced this, Elle, but I have people who really want certainty from me. They really want me to tell them that I can help them lose weight or that they will have this experience with their health. And I can never guarantee that for them. And I'm like, I cannot guarantee that. And if that is what you need, then we cannot work together because that pressure, that expectation that you're setting, that that's not the dynamic that I have with people, and everybody has their own journey, has to let it unfold, so the whole, like, money back guarantee or, like, cannot have that, like, we're
You
all
work with bodies
bodies.
and minds and emotions
Yeah.
and habits and behaviors, and I think, as I have learned, it's one of the hardest things, I think, because we're in these industries where you're supposed to guarantee a specific result, And I think when you work with bodies and minds and hearts and psyches, you cannot guarantee something in a specific time frame that is super specific. And I
Yeah.
think as I have learned from my teachers, Juliet, I think that makes you impeccably trustworthy. You might disappoint people in the moment, but it makes you so fucking trustworthy to actually be that transparent and say, I cannot promise you that, but here's what I can say I will do.
Yeah, I can guarantee that people will have a transformation in how they think or feel just in given that every single person that I've worked with for the allotted time that I know it takes too, because I'm very honest about this isn't like a 21-day kind of situation, or these are months, 3 months minimum, 6 months, okay, you're really moving along, 1 year, wow, look where you are. Just the other day, I had a session with a client, and she did 10 perfect push-ups, and I just started crying, 'cause to where we started with her being able to not even do a push-up from her knees, not even 1 push-up on the knees, to now 2 years later, 10 perfect push-ups on the toes at close to 50 years old, that is everything to me, and it takes time and dedication and commitment to your health and your well-being, whether it's your physical body or it's your emotional body. This is not something that you can necessarily have a healing or a transformation with instantaneously. You gotta just accept and be in it for the long haul, because 'cause you're always gonna be improving.
Absolutely. And I imagine there's something about this work with this client where your client can really take ownership of everything that they have put into this process, and those 10 push-up, like, that really belongs to them. You did not grant them a wish because they paid you enough money. You didn't wave a magic wand and make it happen. Like, they did that, and you accompanied them with that, and there's something so honest and true and reliable about that, and in a way, I think, like, you that is true resource building with your client, and that's something that they'll have for life.
Yeah, and I know when we talk about just show up and be consistent, I know that gets thrown around a lot in the health space, but that is the reality of what this person did every single week for 2 years, unless maybe they were on a vacation or were sick. They showed up 2 to 3 times per week for 2 years straight, and not every session was a good session. There were sessions where they were tired or they were emotional or they were having a hard day, but regardless, work was put in, and not every single session's gonna be some amazing heroic thing that you're gonna be doing. And this goes with also therapy too. I had so many therapy sessions where I was like, "I really don't wanna fucking be here." Like, I'm resentful that I have to spend this hour like, working on myself, and I don't wanna work on myself. I wanna go and I wanna get a drink. I wanna go and I wanna watch a show. I wanna do anything but talk about my feelings and what's going on,
I'm
but,
over here cracking up
you
and
know,
nodding my head in
you're
agreement.
yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
It's because it is hard to be consistent and show up for that, but the consistency is what is actually going to do the work. It's not each session being some amazing special thing, and if you have that expectation that you're gonna have some exciting thing happen all the time, then you're setting yourself up for a big disappointment.
I think it's so true. I think it's so true. And I think it's interesting, this consistency piece, because I talk about it sometimes from a marketing perspective is like consistency builds trust with an audience. But I think consistency builds trust with ourselves. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of
it does,
what it's all about.
absolutely, because
Yeah.
you have to show up for yourself. When we're going back to resourcing yourself. I think that's the biggest resource you can give yourself is consistency with something, like, whether it's putting yourself to bed at a reasonable hour every night, or it's cooking yourself something that's nutritious, or doing something good for yourself, like taking a walk with a friend versus eating 12 cookies by yourself, whatever, which is like what I used to do. I realized like the loneliness piece. It was like if I put myself out there and found community, maybe I wouldn't feel like I needed to fill this hole with a whole bag of cookies. So,
I think it's such a good point. You traded one resource for another. You got clear about what it is you actually needed.
Yeah. I'm curious for you, just on a personal note, if you're willing to share with the audience, what are the things that you need to resource yourself that you've learned?
Community for sure. Creative expression is a big one for me. And for sure, connecting with the people who came before me in my family, and that can also be teachers. It could be even people I've never even met, like Frida Kahlo for me is one, who've done something that I admire, who have qualities that I admire. But I'm thinking, for example, like my mom started her own business. No human being is perfect, but that is one piece of her that I, among so many, that I admire. And I know I can take with me into my future that bolsters me and is a resource and supports me. My dad had a hellacious sense of humor. Like oh my God, he had the best laugh. That's a piece that I bring with me into my future. That's a resource for me, having not taking anything too seriously. He obviously took a lot of things seriously, but keeping a sense of levity and humor about things, that's another resource. And I could go on and on and on and on. Like,
These are things that you've discovered about yourself, though, throughout the years, which is really beautiful. You're paying attention to
yeah,
them. I think if we just slow
yeah,
down enough sometimes to pay attention, that's why I live here
absolutely.
now because nature is the biggest resource for me in my health. Like,
Yeah.
I did not realize how that was impacting me until I left and came to the mountains, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
need these
nature is a
mountains."
huge one. And I feel as like human beings, that's like a
True,
universal one, right?
true.
That's
It's
a really
nature.
great one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up community too, because that's something I feel like I have a really good community, but I'm also actively trying to cultivate that even more.
Mhm.
Like full disclosure, I am not necessarily like a religious person, so I don't go to church, but I noticed that but I was raised Irish Catholic. So I used to
Okay.
go to church every Sunday and we had this whole like community and it's in the church and that people to celebrate good times with and people to mourn with you when you're going through a tough time. And so I look at like currently like the current landscape for millennials and like our generation and I'm like I feel if you don't go to church there are a lot of I guess outlets that people find to form community but it's I'm still looking for that piece of what's something I could do like weekly or biweekly where it's like a community of people.
Mhm.
So I'm still on the hunt for that. I'm
Yeah.
still searching.
And obviously, you can do it through, like, movement practices because fitness studios, that happens a lot. That's one of the reasons people
Mhm.
like fitness studios so much. Yes, it's a cool
It's
workout and it's
true.
fun, but it's more because you get to see the same people in your classes. If you're a regular at those time slots, you'll get to know everybody that shows up, and even if you never hang out with those people, just knowing their name and having these little exchanges is massive, and I have that here at the yoga studio that I go to in Boulder. One of the reasons I, like, don't wanna move far from where we are is because I found this community, and I go 3 times a week. Sometimes I'll go, like, almost every day. Because there's yin classes,
I
there's
get it. It's
and I
awesome.
know so many people. I've never hung out with them necessarily. A couple people I've actually spent some time off the mat with, but there's real connection that happens even in the small exchanges with people on a regular basis. One incredible community member recently, his dad passed, and I knew that this was, like, going to be happening because he alluded to, like, his dad was in hospice and this is gonna happen, and then after we practiced one day, he turns around and he's like, "He died today," and it was just like, we had this moment of just, like I, like, put my arm on him and, like, I'm gonna start crying because it was just such a beautiful exchange with someone that, like, we're all human and we don't need to necessarily have such intimate relationships with somebody to create such a beautiful connection that, like, I feel so much love for this human being that I've never hung out with in my life before, like, off of just breathing, and I guess we're meditating and we're moving together multiple times a week, which is a sacred thing, right? But I don't know,
Absolutely.
it just
You're
makes
such
me
a beautiful person,
it just makes
Juliet.
me so emotional because this is a missing element for a lot of people right now, and you're not alone in this, and this is big for me, and when I found this yoga studio, I was like, "You don't understand how much this is healing me," right? Just coming here, like, multiple times per week, this
I
space.
love that.
But what I was gonna offer to you, and this is something that I'm thinking about doing myself, is, like, creating community. And I wanted to put together more wellness professional events in Boulder where I can host and reach out or have different people host. We're going to do yoga and drinks, and it's for wellness professionals. So people who are like-minded that are in my industry, I can meet them and we can meet each other and potentially form relationships and have it be like maybe regular things. Or I know that I've seen lots of different like women's circles that are really cool that I'm sure like exist, but you have to just try them and see if like you vibe, because not everybody is going to be what you vibe with. I've had
Yeah,
those
those are great
experiences too.
suggestions.
But I'm like, I'm with you. I'm like trying to cultivate more of that too, because you just feel held. You feel safe and held when you have regular interactions with people that people like a posse. People have your back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's so important, that community aspect.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that you wanna share with the listeners about what you do, family constellations, anything else you didn't mention that you wanna share before we wrap up?
Sure. If anyone is interested in learning more about family constellations or attending one of my family constellations workshop, you are welcome to visit my website, ellebrowning.com. That's ELLEBROWNING.com.
I love it. Awesome, and I hope they do, because the work that you're doing is so powerful and transformative, and you are just a beautiful person to echo that back to you. You're such a gorgeous soul, human being, like, so much wisdom to share with people and so much empathy and space that you hold and trust that people can have with you when you're working with someone, and I think that that makes all the difference when it comes to who we choose as our coaches or practitioners to work with. You have to feel like you can truly be yourself and trust that person to hold space for you. So, Elle is that person. She's a amazing human being.
Thank you so much, Juliet. That means so much coming from you because I feel the same way about you as a coach, nutritionist, accompaniment
Amazing. Well, I love you,
expert.
and I'm so happy that you were
I
on the
love you
show.
too. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun.
Yeah. Hold on, I have to ask Mackie if I hit stop. This is a new system. I don't wanna mess it up. Hey, Mackie, do I just hit the big red stop button?